So Laura, with your academic background and your degree and career in the psychology field, what is it about creative writing and fiction that captured you?
Well, I think I have a creative talent, and it's something that I've always had since I was a young child, and it's something I've always wanted to do. Losing Cadence, it took me 8 years to write because I went through my own career crisis, and I was working for a company as a consultant, and I was traveling a lot and stuff, and then our whole team got laid off in Canada. It was a company based in the US. And when I got laid off, I actually went to see a career counselor, and I said, okay, I'm 27 years old. I'm debating whether I should do my doctorate in psychology or become a novelist. And literally, I went through career counseling for that. And it was really, really helpful because the decision was made that I'm too extroverted. I'm very extroverted. And to be a novelist full time would have been too much time on my own, and it was a higher risk venture for someone who's a high achiever like me. It was a higher risk venture, so I decided I would do the writing as a hobby and do the career in psychology, which was more a sure thing. I knew I could do it, and then I started Losing Cadence right before I started my doctorate. So I started it, and then I would stop, and I'd find more time in the summers than during the school years. And then at the end of the PhD, I had my son, and then I had another son 2 years later. And then, so it was just one thing after another. And then I started 3 businesses during those years. So it took me 8 years to finish Losing Cadence, which is a very inefficient way to write a book. Very inefficient, because my maturity and my writing style changed over 8 years. So I had to keep going back to the beginning of it. And whereas my second book took me 15 months. So now I know how to get things done faster when I have a timeline and a passion.
What is your process? Are you a pantser, plotter? What do you like? How do you like to approach the writing process?
Definitely a pantser. So definitely when I'm writing, it's as if I'm watching a movie. So I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know what's going to happen next. And it's really fun that way. If I had to map it all out in a detailed outline, to me, that would seem similar to work. It would seem more like work, and it wouldn't be as fun. Yeah.
So then you took, once it was done, you took it out there and shopped it and tried to, were you looking at agents, or were you looking at publishers, or did you try both, or?
Well, I was sitting on the book, and then I met an editor who was a friend, and she turned into a friend, but she essentially said, I wrote this book, and she said, oh, can I read it? And she said, what the heck? She said, this is better than Gone Girl. She said, why haven't you done anything? And I said, well, I'm so busy with my other stuff. And she said, well, I'll help you shop it out to agents, and I can be your editor. And I said, well, I need a project manager because I don't have time to stay on top of even the publishing process, even if I got. And she said, okay. So we shopped it out to 100 agents. But by shopping it out, I mean queries, right? I didn't get to meet them face to face. And I think if I could have secured an agent easier. Now that I've been to conferences and seen that process, I think I'd have a better shot that way. Then I think the queries, I think they're overwhelmed with emails, and a project comes through and they say, that sounds interesting, but I'm just full, right? Like, I don't know who this Laura is, Dr. Laura, who is she, and whatnot. So I didn't have luck with an agent, and I almost gave up on the project after all those PFOs, I call them. But I was getting PFOs over email during my work days, right? I get agents, thanks, but no thanks, thanks, but no thanks, and all this. And I thought, okay, my book's not really worth doing anything about. And I was quite put off, and I thought about giving up at that point.
Mm.
Yeah, and my editor said, look, there's this self-publishing option now. You could be an indie author, and there's actually pros to that. You don't have a boss, right? And I'm not used to having a boss. I'm used to running my own companies, running my own show. So this started to appeal to me, this idea of, okay, well, let's give it a shot.
What in your mind is the key to creating a good psychological thriller? What elements does it have to have?
Well, I think it has to grab people's attention from the start, and I think I've been good at that with both of my books, the first book, Losing Cadence, and the sequel, Finding Sophie. And I think it has to have lots of twists and turns and unpredictability, like any thriller, whether it's crime or whether it's, you know, any type of thriller needs to have twists and turns, unpredictability. And then I think the thing with a psychological thriller is it has to almost play with people's emotions, where they hate the antagonist, but they also love the antagonist. Their emotions are mixed about the person, right? Because the person is multifaceted, and I think I've done well at that with my antagonist, especially in the second book where we get into his backstory and childhood. And my editor said at my book launch last week, she said, "I dare you not to fall in love with Richard, Laura's antagonist, even though you hate him in the first book, right? You hate him." So it's an emotional roller coaster, but in a good way. It's not, I don't want to disturb people. I don't want people to feel like it sticks with them in a disturbing way or they can't sleep because of it. But I want them to stay up late and not sleep because they're page turning.
Did you always have a sequel in mind, or is it something that came about when you're writing the first book, or was it based on feedback from readers? How did the sequel come about?
I didn't know if I would do a sequel for sure or not, because I needed to build confidence that this was going to entertain a lot of readers. And I said to my editor, if people ask about a sequel and they want it, then I'll be interested in writing it. And then sure enough, people who read it said, "Oh my God, when is the sequel coming? When is it coming?" My editor said, "Laura, you need to write it in the next 18 months. Otherwise, all your followers forget the first book." Right? And I said, "Well, I'm really busy. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a mother of 3 kids. How am I going to do this?" And then I had to make a decision, and I decided that it was a really good outlet for me. I enjoyed the time. It was a break from reality, and I wanted to find out what happened. So then I wrote Finding Sophie, and I set the book 12 years later, and I'm told that it's better than the first book. I'm told that it toys with your emotions, and it's just, people can't put it down. So I'm very happy about that. And then I had to make a decision, Joe, about doing a trilogy. And usually in thrillers, you don't have a trilogy in thrillers.
Right.
A lot of thrillers are one-offs, right? And so I think it's unusual even to have a sequel, although Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and stuff like that was a trilogy. So I decided, well, I made a decision, and you'll be able to see if you read it, what happens if it's going to be a trilogy or just the sequel.
What did you learn from writing the first book that you applied to writing the sequel?
I learned not to be too wordy, because then you end up having to cut all those words out anyway. And time is not my friend, so I had to be very efficient with my time. You know, you can always add later, but you need to get the story down.
Were there any unique challenges in writing a sequel that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge of making sure you're consistent with the facts in the first book. And if I hadn't read it in a while, so I had to refer back to it to be consistent, knowing that some people would read both books in a row, right?
Right.
The second challenge was the second book took more research than the first book, because the second book is set on a super yacht, or a mega yacht, which is one of the biggest yachts in the world. So I had to talk to a yacht expert. I had to talk to a military expert from the Navy. I had to talk to a helicopter expert, right? I had to get a lot of facts down that in the first book didn't apply as much. I didn't have to do as much research.
What do you cherish most about being indie?
I like that I have control over my own project and my own destiny. I like the term indie better than the term self-published. I still think there's a bit of a stigma, and I don't like that when people, some people say, "Oh, who's your publisher?" And then you have to say, "Oh, I went on my own. I'm independent," right? And then you can see that they're just, some of them are judging, because I think there's a problem. There's a lot of, anyone can self-publish, so then you get the whole gamut of complete flakes. And I've bought a few of those books, and you read the book and you think, "Oh my goodness, it wasn't even edited. I can't even read this." because I'm seeing mistakes every sentence, and there's the whole gamut. And I think the whole world of publishing is changing, and I like to be on the forefront of things in my career and in my life. And I think being an indie is at the forefront, because I think if you have the right marketing and the right network and everything, you can end up doing better than you could with a traditional publisher that takes a big percent of all your profits. And from what I understand from talking to other authors who have been both traditional and indie, and some of them both, they've said the traditional publishers, they do a lot leading up to your launch, and then they desert you and they're on to the next project. So essentially then you have to do your own publicity and marketing anyway. And I would be really ticked off if I had to be investing in all of that and they were taking X% of my profits off the top for years thereafter. I think that would feel really unfair.
Where you're at, Calgary especially, but Canada in general, they're known for majestic landscapes, scenic environments. And you touched on this with going to retreats and stuff like that. So is that the most important thing to you in terms of when you write, where you write? Do you think it makes a huge difference?
I do think it makes a difference. And so we had a summer property on a lake in Montana, and it was off the grid, and it's just this beautiful water. It's almost like you're in the Caribbean because the water's aqua color, and there's turtles that swim by, and it is amazing, this lake. And it's not for everyone, because being off the grid had a lot of challenges as well. But I wrote a lot of the books there, and it was very just being in nature and stuff was just a great place for being relaxed and feeling a creative outlet. But could I write at home in the living room? Yes, absolutely. I think the bigger thing for me, the view is really important, but it's not a deal breaker. The deal breaker is having quiet. I'm not the type that can have music going and all this. I have to have absolute quiet in order to let my creative process flow.
Loved your blog.
Thank you.
How great a tool has that been for your author career? And do you think it's something that every author should have?
I think it has been useful to have a blog and an e-newsletter. So I was doing my e-newsletter every 2 months because I'm so busy. And then I went to an excellent session at a conference at the Surrey International Writers Conference, which is an awesome one. If you want to go to one in Canada, that's the one to go to. It's just fantastic. Yeah, I went to a session by Stina Holmes, who's a best-selling author. And she said every month is best. And new e-newsletter is critical for indie authors, because she was on Twitter and Twitter cut her off for a few days. She said, at any point in time, these social media channels could cut you off for doing something inadvertently that you didn't mean to do. And I thought, oh my goodness, right? I have almost 600 on my Facebook, but what if something went wrong? Like, what if it was just hacked? And then you lost all of that, right?
Yeah, right.
And Facebook's charging you every step of the way to boost now anyway. And she said e-newsletters absolutely critical. So I think to answer your question, monthly e-newsletter is critical if you're looking at growing followership and readers.
Complete this sentence for me. When I write, I am
in a state of flow. And flow means that you're highly engaged in what you're doing, to the point that time goes by so quickly and you are just passionate about what you're doing. And it doesn't feel like work.